Eric and I have been so far back in the woods on top of a mountain, and I blew the tire out on the back of my 4x4, and who was under the vehicle right then? Eric Trump. Eric Trump changed the tire. Donald Trump has taught his kids the very best.
I love the personal stories that you never would get unless you got Governor Jim Justice, who wants to be Senator Jim Justice of West Virginia, who loves the outdoors, and so does Eric Trump. My guest is Eric Trump. Eric, do you remember this moment?
This was one of the great moments of my life. I went down, so Jim Justice owns the Greenbrier, and obviously we're in the hotel world, and so I go down to West Virginia to see the Greenbrier Hotel, and that's obviously...
Which, by the way, we have a great feature on Fox Nation of the Greenbrier.
It had the famous nuclear bunkers under it. It was where Congress was going to go.
If there was a nuclear war.
If there was a nuclear war, they're going to go to the Greenbrier, and it's totally hidden out of sight, and finally, I think in the 90s, New York Times. But anyway, Jim Justice owns it, so he wants to show me his farm next door. So we're off-roading on this farm. We're both in suits. I'm in a beautiful suit. He's in a beautiful suit. And he loses the front tire. And Jim's a big boy. No. I mean, he hits a rock, and
he's 6'7", maybe 350
at least, right? He might be taller than that, and he might be. I love Big Jim. That's why we call him Big Jim, right? He's just a great. He's one of the kindest human beings ever. So anyway, I grab one of his Dickies overalls. These are 3XL. I put them on over the thing, and I go under the car, and he gave me this beautiful Greenbrier book. I put the jack stand on this Greenbrier book. I'm jacking up his Suburban. He's eating candy in the front seat. I go, Jim, I'm literally under your truck. Stop shaking your truck. The last thing, you're going to crush a Trump in the face with your Suburban on the side hill. But anyway, I changed the governor's tire, and we've been dear friends ever since. And he's a wonderful guy, and I think he's going to win that seat handedly.
Yes. He was a Democrat.
I know.
And he got to know your dad when he was president. He said, I'm switching. And he did it on our show.
So can I out him? Because now that he's outing me about changing tires while he eats candy in the Suburban.
Right.
He said to me, he goes, Eric, I and this was when he was Democrat, he goes, Eric, I really believe in your father. I am in line with every policy. And if I win this, and if your father wins this, I'm going to change parties. And I called him up, and this was maybe a month or two after, my father, everything kind of settled in. And I said, hey, you still ready to do that? He goes, I'm ready to do it. So we all fly down to White Sulphur Springs, and Jim comes out, and he's effectively announces that he's changing from being a Republican governor to a Democratic governor to a Republican governor, and it got zero media coverage. I mean, the media.
No, we were.
Well, Fox. Okay, fine, Fox. But among the country, they just couldn't handle this just rabid defeat of a governor, changing political affiliation. It was just such a blow to their ego, but. That was a proud moment.
Your dad won by 40 points or something in West Virginia. You had Joe Manchin, a Democrat, and you had a Democratic governor. And you know what? Joe Manchin and Senator Sinema, and they did a lot. I mean, they stood up. They stopped the packing of the court. They stopped the end of the filibuster. So I give them credit. They've effectively said, I'm from a red state. I can't just pretend as if I can go along with these policies. But now Manchin says I can't compete with Jim Justice, and he's going to win handily. Are you worried about – I know you break this down. Normally I would keep it to the president, but I know you care about this too, because one of the things I heard from a key member of your campaign was to win the presidency without the Senate, it's going to be more than frustrating because they're going to try to impeach right away.
Yeah.
So are you worried about Pennsylvania? There might be a double-digit deficit now, according to the latest poll, and I think Dave McCormick's a fantastic candidate. Are you worried about Montana, where he's about 4 or 5 points down? Tammy Baldwin's winning in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Listen, I look from the top of the take it down, and a lot of people look from the bottom of the take it up. And, I think an incredibly strong president, kind of raises the tide for everybody. And I think you have to have the best people. Yeah, I've always said that the biggest focus of any party should be recruiting. I mean, you go in, you get
But you
Nick
do get
Saban,
some good candidates. I mean,
no, there's no question about it. We have incredibly strong candidates, and I think we're going to win. I really believe we're going to hold all three. I do, and I think my father's going to win in a major way, assuming that funny business isn't happening. And but make no mistake, Brian. I never like to play from being ahead. And it feels like we have the wind at our back right now.
You have never been ahead. I mean, you shocked everyone in the primaries, and then there was a little bit of a surge in 2015, and then you win. And then people are like, I'm not going along with this. The Never Trumpers came out. They made it a very hostile environment in 2016 at the Republican convention compared to conventions.
Well, here's why. Here's why I don't like to play from ahead. Right? They always have and I'm telling everybody right now that's listening to this, there will be an October surprise. Just remind yourself that Eric Trump said this on Brian Kilmeade's show. There will be an October surprise because it is their playbook. They've done it for the last 40 years. And, they define it as an October surprise being – something that they pop on you, that they get the entire mainstream media to run with for a period of 3 weeks is so sensational that it hurts you, and that you don't have time to disprove because you're too close to the election to disprove and turn around. And by the time you disprove it, the damage is already done. The Democrats do it every single time. They did it with the Russia nonsense. They do it every time. They always have a trick up their sleeve, right? And everybody's, what's going to happen with Biden? Is he going to make it to the finish line? I don't know. You know why? Because they always have a trick up their sleeve. They always have something there. They always have their October surprise.
Well, they had the Access Hollywood, but then she got her emails caught up with Abedin and Weiner, so that kind of neutralized things.
Well, you know what? I think people have become desensitized to this because they understand the games of the parties. They understand the games of these, the political animals and. But I just never like to play like you're ahead, right? They always have something up their sleeve. They're always conspiring in the background. They're smart as hell. They're evil as hell. It's almost hard to believe coming out of the business world that this is kind of the way people can act, but it is. I mean, power is very much corrupting, and so I never like to play like you're ahead. I never like to think that you have momentum at your back. I actually like to run like we're behind.
So on Saturday to Sunday, we watched the special coverage of the assassination attempt, and it was real. The New York Times caught it, the screaming bullet ricocheting off your dad's face. I never thought that was even possible, that there were shutters of speed like that. And we see all the drama, and they decide, the NBC decides, I can't have Morning Joe on. So they lie to him, and they say, we're going to have NBC News coverage on all our platforms, CNBC, MSNBC, and NBC News. It turns out they only pulled Morning Joe. What's your reaction?
Well, you know what? I knew those too, and it hurts. They know exactly who we are as people. They know how great of a person my father is. They know me personally, and every single day I hear them spew their nonsense, and it's just kind of infuriating. Now I don't think anybody watches that show, and I don't think they take them seriously anymore as journalists because they're just, they're so wild and crazy. But what happened that day was unthinkable. I mean, we almost had a former president, very likely to be future president, assassinated on live TV, while millions and millions of people were watching on every network across the country and, frankly, around the world. And it's hard to believe that could ever happen.
Their company did not trust them enough to be deferential at that moment.
Yeah, of course.
Isn't that crazy?
Of course they didn't, and they were afraid of the ramifications. But frankly, the same thing's happening with Biden. I mean. The American people have been spoon-fed nonsense. And they didn't believe the nonsense, by the way. But they've been spoon-fed nonsense by the mainstream media. I'm not including Fox in this, but literally, for the last 4 years. That, Biden is the equivalent of the modern Einstein. And that, he's got a great, he may as well have been Hemingway. And it's all crap. And people knew it was crap. Everybody knows it was nonsense. And then, sure enough, after hearing this for 4 years and after having him covered by the media for a 4-year period of time, he comes out on that debate stage. He hardly makes a podium. He's gazing up at the sky. Nothing is registering. He can't get through a sentence. He didn't get a single number in the debate right. He literally can't figure out where commas go. He can't tell the difference between a million and a billion and a trillion or 1,000. I don't know why it doesn't register, but he flubbed every single number in that debate. And it was just a total train wreck. It was the worst debate that anybody's ever had in probably American history on one side and probably the best on the other side. And I think the media lost real credibility there. It's like we can't cover for this guy anymore. It doesn't work. And
it happened just a drop of a hat, and he wanted that debate. I want you to hear. So your dad escapes what he said to the New York Post. I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So it didn't take long till people not only were over the near-death experience, but were commenting on the bandages. Listen to cut 27.
There are a lot of questions around that ear, and yet there's been no response to that. Instead, just showing the image of the man coming into the hall with the wounded ear.
A spectacle for this candidate who we know is, by his own admission, obsessed with assorted spectacles. There is a political quest here to mine and use Donald Trump's injury, and whether his allies and Republicans or the candidate himself do that in a way that overextends their credibility will be decided by the voters.
What is your reaction? I mean, I'm stunned. I heard it for the first time.
Brian, it's infuriating. I sat there with a 6-year-old child on my lap and a 4-year-old child on my lap, and I almost saw my father's head get taken off based on pure incompetence. Based on the fact that a roof at 130 yards was totally unguarded. And this isn't like a small roof. This was totally unguarded and left open. By the grace of God, he turned his head. It took off the backside of his ear. He had blood running down his face. When asked Biden about it, he said he spoke to his Secret Service director, not understanding that his Secret Service director was actually a female. I mean, he said he spoke to him, not realizing it was actually a female. Then that Secret Service director said that the reason that they didn't have anybody on the roof was that it was a pitched roof. Yet the roof that the Secret Service snipers are on, that they actually took the guy out from, had a much steeper pitch to it than the actual roof. This is the incompetence that we're dealing with, and you almost had a former president assassinated on live TV. Civil wars in countries have been started for less than that. Think about the standing that America would have had having a person get shot in the head, somebody as revered as Donald Trump around the world. It would have made our country look like a bunch of jokers. And this is the narrative that they're on. Could you imagine if the reverse happened to Obama? Could you imagine if the reverse happened to, Clinton?
Can you imagine me going, I don't think he needs a bandage.
Under a Trump administration, they would have been calling for his resignation. Not only would they be calling for the resignation of the Secret Service director, they'd be calling for my father's resignation had the reverse happened.
So listen to what you're talking about. The United States Secret Service director is a woman, Kim Cheadle, and was asked about what's the problem with that roof, Cut 28.
Should that roof have been secure, period?
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
Feel better?
It's insane. The roof that the counter snipers were on, and I know these guys. I spent a lot of time shooting with them. This is kind of a hobby of mine, right? I know the world very, very well. The roof that the counter snipers were on was significantly steeper. Their tripod, these really right stuff tripods, are set up at the top of the roof at a steep angle. That's why the guy was using that three-legged tripod, because he was right on the apex of that roof. And that roof was much steeper than the other roof. Give me a break. This is the incompetence that we're dealing with. And I almost lost my father because of this incompetence, and they better get to the bottom of it.
Well, what does it tell you? Just think this out, that they were able to kill him almost right away. They had to have eyes on him. I mean, they blew him up. They blew his head off.
The sad thing is no one actually believes that this investigation is going to be done fairly. 10 years ago, if you would have said that the FBI was going to run this investigation, I would have said it was going to be totally impartial. The facts were going to lead the way, and that it was going to be honest to the American people. I was the guy that got the call about the Russia scam. I hear you have Secret Service that are connected to the Kremlin in Moscow from Trump Tower. I go,
this was between winning and taking over?
Yeah, this was
November and January?
That's right. This was in 2016, 2017, early 2017. I hear you have Secret Service, Eric, that are connected from the basement of Trump Tower to the Kremlin. First of all, we don't have servers in the basement. Second of all, we're like cloud-based computing, right? So if you get back, you don't put servers in basements because basements flood, right? Let's just start at the basics. The FBI knew that was nonsense, and they did nothing for 3 years. They let a Russia hoax hang over my father's head for a 3-year period of time. Does anybody actually believe? And I love the men and the women, the gun carriers in the FBI, the greatest people in the world. I have a lot of those friends. But does anybody actually think that the leadership of the FBI is going to take this seriously, or is going to be impartial? No one does. Every American's lost faith in these institutions because they've seen how these institutions have been weaponized against the American people, and so it doesn't give me reassurance that there's an investigation. That investigation is going to be, it's going to come out absolutely muted and nothing will happen and there's no accountability. She should be fired. She should resign in absolute disgrace, and they should really take a look at the protocols. And it pains me to say that because the men and women on that stage, one of them who was on my detail for a long period of time, the female that was on the stage, who's one of the greatest human beings you'll ever meet, they did their job perfectly, and they would have died for the former president. And had it not been for the CS guys, the counter snipers, they probably would have been dead.
So you are not against women into the Secret Service?
I can tell you that female on the stage can outshoot all those guys. Because
And what about the courage?
I've seen her do it. And she jumped on him, and she would have eaten a bullet for him in a heartbeat. And in fact, if I were them, I would be infuriated that somebody – and remember, they move with the president.
Right.
So, they got to the site with the president 10 minutes before. They're not covering roofs. That's not their duty. They're body people, and then you have people who are dealing with the perimeter. Something happened on the perimeter, and we almost had a former president, my father, lose his life over it. And now they're talking about whether or not, there's too many bandages on his ear. I mean, this is literally the discourse of the media.
Did you know that was out there? Did people tell you that they were talking about that?
I hadn't heard that, but when I saw blood rushing down the side of his face, and I'm trying to shield my children's eyes from it, I can't believe that 72 hours later, this is the dialogue by MSNBC or whoever the hell it is. So
I've seen him. I remember I was at the Apprentice final, one of the last ones. Geraldo was in.
Yeah.
So when they were in the breaks, I went to the actual event. Everyone went to the pre-fun where the party was. I went to the event where you just sit in the audience, and I'm just watching. And in the breaks, do you remember what happened? You didn't have kids yet, but all Don's kids, all his grandkids would be running up. Barron, running up.
Yeah.
In the breaks, he was a grandfather.
Yeah.
Then they quickly scatter around. Every break, the family's running out. I go, so that's – but I think your father is reluctant to – maybe he wants the kids to be anonymous, but he's reluctant to show the grandfather.
Yeah.
He's reluctant to show the father. And do you think that might change? Because people need to see that.
He came to my daughter's school. She's 4 years old. He came to, Grandfather Day, Grandparents' Day at my daughter's school, and she didn't know he was coming, and – sure enough, he walks in. Obviously, the school knows because of Secret Service. And,
in Florida.
Shows up, and she sees him and just breaks down to tears, runs up, gives him a hug, and there's the cutest little picture where he's holding her little hand, and the hand's so, she weighs 35 pounds, right?
Does she know that he's the president?
Yeah.
Absolutely. She knows.
And
Okay.
she loves him. And he walks into her classroom with her holding this, his big hand and her small little hand, and, them walking side to side. And, I posted the little video of it, and it took down. I mean, he is so good with his grandkids. He's so good. He was so great with us as kids. Right. Brian, if he wasn't a great father, you think I'd be going through the hell that I've gone through in 8 years? I'm the most subpoenaed person in the history of the country. I've taken more arrows, other than him, I've probably taken more arrows than anybody in the history of politics. And they've come after me in ways that people don't even understand, 99% of which aren't even published, right? They've tried to destroy our lives. They've tried to bankrupt us. They've tried to take us down. They've tried to destroy our company.
But it seems to me it brought you closer.
No question.
It sealed you off.
And if he wasn't a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal father, a phenomenal guy, a phenomenal friend, believe me, I wouldn't be fighting this fight.
All right. Hopefully we do this a lot. We got another 3 or 4 months and nobody better to talk to. Congratulations, Eric. So far, so good.
So far, so good.